companionship are at the heart of what we do at the Older Women's Network, alongside our advocacy for older women on issues of poverty, homelessness, and domestic violence. We also work to overcome the issues of loneliness, isolation, and disconnection within communities. We are in partnership with the Friendship Alliance, and they are celebrating today themselves. But one of the great initiatives that I'd like to mention of the Friendship Alliance is the Friend Line. Now, this is for anyone who needs to have a chat, a bit of a yarn, and it's staffed by volunteers. And we'll put the number for the Friend Line up in the chat box, which you'll see to the right side of your screen, sometime during this conversation or at the end of the conversation. So if you need to ring that number, it'll be there. And as well, talking about the chat, we'd love you to post comments throughout our conversation about your experience of friendship, and what you think the key factors in robust and strong and enduring friendships are, whether they're intergenerational friendships or cross-cultural friendships. We're going to be talking about all of those things. If you've got a question, we'll try and come to your questions during the conversation. Okay, so let me dive in and introduce our panel. First of all, we have got Patricia Amphlet. Pattie, you might want to wave.
Okay.
Pattie is best known to many as Little Pattie, as a pioneer of Australian surf music, starting her career at the age of 13. She was awarded an Order of Australia in 2003 for her work with Actors Equity and the Media and Arts Alliance Union, and has been a great favourite amongst Vietnam vets and done a lot of work with vets and with the National War Museum. She is the voice these days with her old friend Lex Marinos of the Baby Boomers Guide to the 21st Century, which is a fantastic podcast, which I recommend to you, where they cover everything that affects us as we get older in a breezy sort of lifestyle mix. And it includes really money, sex, tourism, I don't know, nothing is off limits. So go and find the Baby Boomers Guide if you haven't found it already. And with her today is her friend Wendy Honey. Hi, Wendy. Pattie and Wendy speak to each other, I think, every day. Wendy was one of the first 4 female customs officers in 1967, having decided after being a hairdresser that there was more to life, and has spent 27 years in customs. I keep wondering, Wendy, whether I've been past you and whether you've looked in my suitcase at the airport. That's what I've been wondering about you.
I doubt it. Because most of my time in plain clothes.
In plain clothes. Okay, well, that sounds intriguing. So Pattie and Wendy met in the 1980s. They were introduced by a mutual friend, and we'll hear a little bit more about that, I hope. I met Deborah Ruiz, who's in red. Hi, Deborah.
Hello.
At an event with 2 Aboriginal aunties, Aunty Ally Golding, who is a Biripi woman, and Aunty Beryl Van Oplu, who I think is a Gamilaroi woman. And she was clearly very good friends with both of them. And so I asked her along today to talk about friendships that cross cultural barriers, because I think many of us would like to have those friendships, but we don't always feel confident about reaching out. And I should just mention that we, of course, did ask Aunty Ally and Aunty Beryl to join us today, but sadly, neither of them feels particularly comfortable on Zoom. So Deborah is going to be here as their representative and talk about her friendship with them. She's had a fascinating life in her own right, growing up in the Philippines and coming here after meeting her Australian husband in Papua New Guinea. She works as an oral historian and is also a writer. And she was also awarded an Order of Australia for services to the community in social justice, multiculturalism, and reconciliation. And I know Catherine Barrett. Where is Catherine? I can't see you on my screen, but I know you're there, through her work promoting awareness of elder abuse. But she's actually here today on a happier note as the founder of an initiative called the Kindness Pandemic, which she started in March last year via her Celebrate Aging website, which I also recommend you go and have a look at. Catherine trained and worked as a nurse in aged care, and she's also been an academic. And now she's a passionate advocate for older people and a campaigner against ageism in every aspect of life. So we love her for that. And a year on, the kindness pandemic has 550,000 members, 330,000 active members. It has run 40 campaigns, generated 100 articles in the media. It's just a fantastic success story. And it's interesting that a survey of the members of the kindness pandemic found that 86% said that being a member of it and being on their Facebook group improved their mental well-being. And finally, we also have Barbara Malcolm with us. Hi, Barbara. Nice to see you. Who has been a member of the Older Women's Network for 20 years and founded the Older Women's Network group in Wallandilly, and was also instrumental in setting up the Older Women's Network Illawarra Wellness Group in Coniston, which is in Wollongong. She is a keen practitioner of Tai Chi, Argentinian drumming, and Scottish dancing. She's a cancer survivor, a grandmother, and a passionate advocate for good physical and mental health and the positive benefits of doing things together. And so we're going to be talking about that too. So welcome to all of you. It's great to have you here, and it's great to have this big audience for this subject, which obviously is very important in our lives, particularly right now. I guess just starting off maybe with you, Pattie and Wendy, what do each of you think? Let's start with you, Pattie. What do you think makes a friendship go the distance? I mean, you two have known each other since the 1980s, so you're now into 40 years of friendship. What do you think is the glue?
I think the glue is that you like each other, but you know, that's a lot of people don't like each other. I like Wendy. I think the fact that we trust each other implicitly. We can talk about anything and do talk about anything with each other. We have similar interests in the books we read, the shows we watch, the humanities, social justice, politics, current affairs, the kind of people we like the same kind of people. And yet I think each of us is terribly broad-minded and I think generous of spirit about everybody, really. You know, we're kind of, we like most people, and we love our pets. We've had so many pets in those 40 years. Currently, each of us has a very, very spoilt cat. Wendy's is called Lily and mine's called Evie, and we are both childless. So, of course, they are our children. We have a sense of others that quite often we meet people that don't. I don't know if I've summed it up very well, but it's a great friendship. It has depth, it has trust, it has, I actually don't know what I'd do without Wendy, because
Wendy, listening to that, would you agree that trust is obviously a very fundamental thing, but what are the other things that you think have made this friendship resilient over 40 years? Because, you know, people's relationships do go through bumpy bits.
Well, I can't really recall us having a bumpy time together, but I would agree with everything Patricia said. But further to that, I think I have enormous respect for her and respect for what she is and what she does, her commitment to Vietnam vets, to her students, and to just people that she really cares about. She's a very committed and loving person.
Do you think that friendship over time evolves? Do you think that it stays? I mean, would you say that your friendship has evolved? Has it changed in terms of, I suppose, depth is acquired with time, but are there other things, like have you shared losses? Have you shared grief? You know, as we get older, we lose people and we turn to our friends often when things are really rough.
Oh yes, definitely. We've shared the loss of pets, as Patricia said, but also, you know, the loss of people. I lost my father that I loved dearly, who she knew. So that during those times, I can turn to her and talk to her. And it's a trust, as she referred to trust, and I think trust and knowing that you can say things to each other that aren't going to be spread around to everybody else.
Yeah, so that's important, isn't it? A certain kind of discretion, I think. Pattie, do you think of friendship as something that requires maintenance? I mean, do you actively kind of keep nurturing the friendship, or do you think it's an organic thing that just kind of looks after itself?
Gosh, I find that hard to answer because I don't, I think it's beyond questioning, because it is, and it is great. It's wonderful. It's a part of my everyday life. And it's different, you know. Of course, I adore my husband. I love my husband, and he's, you know, a best friend too. But a female friend I have, there's no doubt, Wendy, I can't explain it. It's just a great friendship that maybe it's evolved, maybe it's organic, but I don't question that. It is. And I keep saying it, but I would be lost without it.
And do you think, you know, when you were introduced by a mutual friend, did you kind of click instantly? Because, you know, I think there are some friendships where you do just take a look at each other and you go, yes, I want to be friends with you. But other friendships take time to sort of mature while you sort of find out what the common ground is. So with you two, how did that work?
I think probably there was an understand. I think we understood each other quite quickly, because despite my work life, you know, as a performer, where we're all terrible show-offs, really I'm quite shy and understated, and Wendy recognized that in me and respected that, and I respected and noticed that in her. So there's a similarity in our personalities that, and yet when we have conversations together, we are not at all shy, and we can just be ourselves and have a bit of a swear about things, and, you know, it's a great friendship.
Can you imagine either of you, for example, you know, this is a sticking point. This is something that often comes up in conversations about friendship. Do you think it's important that you have to agree with each other about fundamentals? Like, do you disagree on politics, or could you imagine being friends if you did disagree about politics? Wendy, I'm going to ask you that.
Oh gosh, that's very hard to answer, because we're just in total agreement, really. I've never really considered whether, you know, Patricia feeling any other way.
But can you imagine, like, say Patricia suddenly came out one morning and said something that really surprised you and had an attitude to something that you didn't expect? Could that be in a friendship a deal breaker? Or do you think tolerance for different views is a bedrock of friendship?
Oh, I think tolerance is very important. We don't seem to really find we need to exercise tolerance, but I would agree that it's necessary, because there are friendships. I have friendships with people that are totally opposed to my politics, but yet we're very good friends. So, you know, I think you've got to respect their views.
Yes, and then do you just decide with those friends, okay, you respect their views, but they're sort of no-go areas and you just don't talk about those things?
Well, no, we don't really talk about them. No, we don't. I mean, I have friends that vote differently to me, that feel differently, but on other levels, we're good friends, you know. So
yeah, it's one of the paradoxes, I think, that does make friendship kind of really interesting. Barbara, I wanted to come to you, because when we were talking about this conversation earlier this week, we were talking about the fact that some people find friendship difficult, particularly as they get older. They may be shy, they may not be joiners, or they may feel self-conscious about reduced mobility or about the fact that they're not hearing so well anymore. And you're a fantastic advocate for reaching out and joining a group. And I was just wondering whether you could tell us the story of the woman that you drew into the group after several tries.
Oh yes, we're talking about Elizabeth from Wallandilly, a lovely, lovely lady. My meeting with Elizabeth was unusual because I was taking part in a Scottish country dance group. We were all dancing away there, having a nice time and that, and it was just about time for a break. And the door opened and a face peered around the door and then it disappeared straight away. And there was something about that face that I recognised sadness. And I recognised a wanting to join and so on. So I bolted and I just took off and left my cup of tea, which is pretty hard for me, and bolted out of the room after this lady and met her in the car park. And she was having a bit of a weep in the car park, and I spoke to her and found out that she'd been widowed for a few months and she'd sat at home. She said, I've just sat at home crying ever since. And she said, I just know I've got to reach out and do something. So I coaxed her back in with the promise of a cup of tea and a nice piece of cake. So I coaxed her back in, and from then on, Elizabeth and I were friends just about till she passed away. We were very close friends, and that Elizabeth shared my journey. She was Scottish, lovely brogue, beautiful lady. And we shared our love of Scottish dancing. Later on, we found Argentinian drumming, and we were both very passionate about banging on drums. It was great fun. And she also helped me set up the Older Women's Network. She was a foundation member for Wallandilly, so she helped me set that network up. And as I said, till death did we part. We were great friends.
That's a beautiful story. But I mean, she was actually very lucky that you saw her, you read the expression on her face correctly, and then you went out there and you talked her in. You know, she could have, I think you said to me when we were talking on the phone that you think she'd popped her head around that door 4 times.
Yeah, no, she didn't pop her head around it. She didn't even get that far. Later on, after we'd known each other for a little while, and that she told me that she'd driven to the car park. She had heard the Scottish music, the dance music of some time or other, and found out about the dance group. So she'd come to the car park in hoping to join in. And that's as far as she got. She came into the car park, sat in the car, wept for a while, and then went home. The next week she came and she got out of the car and walked towards the door and turned around and went back in the car and had a weep and went home. And then the next time she got to the door, and she said she stood outside that door for ages and ages and listened to the music, weeping her head off, knowing that she couldn't open the door because she was crying so much. So she went back to the car, and then the last time she just stuck her head around the door. And that was when I saw her. Because the other times I had no idea what was happening outside. No. But that time when she looked around the door, but there was also something about Elizabeth's face as well as the tear stains. It was a friendly face, it was hard to describe, but there was something about her that I just knew that she was a lovely lady.
Well, I reckon she was very, very lucky that you, in the middle of some twirling across the dance floor.
Yes, I was having a great time.
You spotted her. So, and I guess, Deborah, I mean, what we're talking about here is about reaching out to someone, and your story really interests me because your story is a story of cultural friendship with 2 Indigenous aunties, and you've got a Filipino background. They've got their cultural heritage, which is very important, but it's not obvious to me how those two cultures kind of connect. So how did you meet Aunty Ally and Aunty Beryl? Was that through living in the same neighborhood? Were you living in Redfern at the time?
No, not at that point. That was a bit, that came a bit later. What happened is because I came from the Philippines at the time when there was martial law. So the idea of human rights was very important for me. And so, you know, when you think about Aboriginal people, just 3% of the population, how do you meet an Aboriginal person? And so I strategically made an effort to meet someone in the flesh so that I could form a relationship with them. You see, so first I went to Action for World Development. Then I looked around and there was no Aboriginal person there. Next, I was at Kaina House, like homeless, just voluntary thing. And the third, and that's when I met Uncle Max Yulo. But to meet Aunty Ally, that was at the Women's Reconciliation Network when I got to join advocacy for Aboriginal people with the Women's Reconciliation Network. And first, where we actually met was at the meeting of a small group, like a red group with the WRN. And we talked as if we knew each other for a long time. And everyone else disappeared. And they were just looking at us and I don't know. And Aunty Ally said, you know, later in hindsight, that was the work of the spirit. So, you know, common ground is that openness on all sides, you know. With Aunty Beryl, we would have met in one of those, that was probably when I was already living in Redfern. Yeah, I rented a house in Redfern to do something to immerse myself in that neighborhood, whilst I was already working full time, you know, teaching. And anyway, where we became close was when she was at Yamadian, where she was head teacher there on the same street where I live. So I live in Newtown. And every time my husband and I were walking past, she's calling me. And then my husband just walked back home afterwards. And then we would just have this amazing yarning. Then we became friends. And then we got to do social functions together, like art galleries, looking at that. And then eventually the three of us became close friends as a trio.
And how important do you think it was in you becoming friends that, for example, you got to meet family, you got to go back to where Aunty Ally and Aunty Beryl had family and grew up, and that how much is that important, do you think, in terms of cementing the relationship, particularly with Indigenous people?
Well, it was important because they found me as open to that and empathetic, I guess, you know, like and then in fact, follow through. I had organized a sharing stories of Filipino women, Aboriginal women. And, you know, they all had set stereotypes about each other to begin with. And then it was just sort of like, suddenly it all fell, you know, the barriers just fell off, because said, oh, you're just like us, they said, you know, with the sharing of stories, just different setting, but the love of family, all those sort of same values, experience in Australia of being marginalized to some extent. We had that in common. And the other thing is we all married, you know, we were all involved in cross-cultural marriages. Aunty Beryl was married to a Dutchman. I was married to an Australian guy, and Aunty Ally was married to an Englishman. So we kind of had all these stories to share with each other, all the, you know, like our recognition of whatever differences are, and we share that with each other.
And I guess what that goes to, which I think is probably a common thread in all the conversations we've had so far, is that sense of active listening, where you're not just, you know, you're not just waiting until you can say something to someone in a conversation, but you're really extracting the marrow of what is this person trying to tell me? And you're connecting at sort of quite a deep level. Wendy, I love the fact that your cat just walked across the screen. That was a very nice moment. But it sounds to me, Deborah, as if you were able, maybe because of your training as an oral historian, to really listen to the sorts of stories that Aunty Ally and Aunty Beryl trusted to share with you.
Yes, and they talk about building bridges. So we were all aware that we had that role of building bridges to the wider world. facilitating, making things happen. So apart from the social connection as family and friends, the advocacy part in our different style that we kind of threaded together as well.
Yeah, well, you had a very solid sort of sense of shared purpose, which I think shared purpose is another, that's another kind of foundational element. Catherine Barrett, listening to this conversation now, you might want to respond to any of the things that the other panelists have said, but also, what we're talking about here, they're all different manifestations, particularly what Barbara said, I think, in terms of reaching out to a stranger. That really illustrates what the kindness pandemic is all about, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And I think, one of the things that we talk about at the kindness pandemic is intersectional kindness. And so we talk about that, that puppies and memes are beautiful, but they won't change the world. They're a little bit fairy floss, and we're interested in intersectional kindness. So kindness that really reaches out to people who are doing it tough. And I think I got that really clearly in everybody's stories, and Barbara's in particular, that one of the things that I love about friendships, and particularly I think for everybody's friendship, but, in this context, particularly friendships for women, and as we age, that friendships have the capacity to take us through times when we can be marginalised. So all of us, and particularly we know the stats on women as they age, there are a whole host of factors that can result in marginalisation: older women and homelessness, financial disadvantage, anxiety, depression, so many of these things that we might not have expected in our lives. And they are the times when our friends really become so incredibly precious. And sometimes there's nothing more precious than a friend who doesn't judge, a friend who goes, as Barbara did, that's a face that's not happy. That's someone who's doing it tough and actually reaching out, putting down the cup of tea and going out and saying, hey, are you okay? What's happening for you? Can I support you? And they're the friends that I love the most in my life. And we all have that capacity to do that for the people around us that are doing it tough. And I think it's a really beautiful, beautiful aspect of friendship.
And I guess what everybody on this panel kind of illustrates is that really another thing about friendship that is sort of, again, a basic requirement, along with that sort of active listening, is genuine curiosity. So in Barbara's case, there was that instant sort of reach out, empathy, recognition. But in Deborah's case, there was that curiosity about, how can I learn more about reconciliation? How can I meet the people that this reconciliation movement is about? And presumably, also Pattie and Helen, you had a kind of curiosity about, a friendship which is not just finding someone who's going to reflect back to you what you already know about yourself, but someone who's going to help you to discover what you think about all sorts of things that you may not have thought about before. Pattie, would that be right?
I think so. I think each of us has a curious mind which has not waned at all. We're both inquisitive and want to learn lots of things about lots of people, lots of events, lots of history. So that's common with each of us. And we are, I know Wendy is essentially such a kind, thoughtful person, and I try to be too, but we're good listeners. That's important, listening.
Yeah.
It's easy to, get in with your opinion before you've listened to the other person's feelings and opinions. So that's really important. In this day and age, time doesn't allow us the grace to do such things always.
Yeah, that's a very nice word to use, the grace, and the patience. We've all become sort of rushed in so many ways. Catherine, just coming back to what you were saying about friendship that's sort of intersectional and inclusive and that supports people through hard times. One of the fantasies that people discuss around dinner tables when they get to a certain age is, wouldn't it be nice if we could get together as a group and we could live together and share our resources and build a place to grow old together where we still preserve our privacy, but we have some communal, shared space, and we've got company on tap. But it seems to me that this model, this fantasy, is still very much the domain of a fairly privileged, fairly wealthy group of primarily, I would say, middle-class professional people. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that model hasn't gained more traction, and that we're not seeing really original ideas around social housing where people of a generation can support each other and can be good company to each other?
I think that's such a good question. And I think one of the things that we crave in the world right now, other than kindness, I think so many people want to live in a kinder world. I think a lot of people want to live in a world where there's more inspirational leadership. And one of the things that we're all doing is we are all looking to our politicians for leadership. And that leaves some of us very thirsty, very dissatisfied. And I think one of the things that we need to recognise is that we are all leaders, and that we all have the capacity to lead. And small gestures, like Patricia and Wendy have done, that living next door to each other and sharing, a cup of sugar or talking about the cats or whatever it is, that's a great start. And then people who are, might share a room, other people might share a room, or in Queensland, there are a group of women who got together who are sharing housing. I think we need to recognise that we are all leaders. And honestly, I think we need to get off our backsides and do it, because no one's going to create a better world for us. We've got to do it for ourselves. And you imagine, like, there's 120 people in this group right now. If 120 people get off this Zoom and go, all right, I'm going to change one thing, one small little thing, and we can transform the world if we do that en masse. And it's really, so it's incredibly important to recognise our own leadership. And I think we've become a little numb to the lack of inspirational leadership, I think.
I think that's really, that's a really powerful point. I hadn't thought of it in those terms. I've thought about feeling disillusioned with leadership, but I haven't thought about us being leaders ourselves in our own communities. Just going back, Deborah, to you and your friendships with Aunty Ally and Aunty Beryl. When I've met you at friendship at events where food has been very important. We've gathered together over meals because we're lucky enough to be in a sort of wider friendship circle with the wonderful Kylie Kwong, who herself is an absolutely amazing example of someone who really does know how to bring people together. And food is quite a good connector, isn't it? So has that been important with you and Aunty Ally or Aunty Beryl? I mean, I know Aunty Beryl is quite interested in food.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to say we have lunch together often, and I think that's the thing. We recognize each other's strengths and gifts, and so with Aunty Ally, it's her storytelling, and food. Gee, one of the films we were both in, while her sister was talking about law, Aboriginal law, that doesn't never change and all of that, and Aunty Ally was munching on on what was available, so food is so important. It's a glue as well, social yarning over food. So and with Aunty Beryl, of course, we often supported each other with attending her functions, like the Job Ready program.
She's quite entrepreneurial, and she's interested in being entrepreneurial around native food, so that must be something that would have interested you.
Yes, and Job Ready program, where she teaches at NCIE, the National Indigenous, Center, and she's presenting and to Aboriginal people without work, to sort of give them an opportunity, because that's what giving back to community, which is what her passion is. Apart from showing recipes, that we can all, practical things like that we can all emulate, like using native ingredients. With Aunty Ally, her passion is story sharing with kids as well, because we call it like lore, but for them this is like birds, messenger birds, they all have association with spirituality. And that's all that gathers us all together, that the three of us is on the openness to spirituality, Aboriginal spirituality and the Christianity.
Okay, so you've got shared faith there. I got a sense that shared faith is quite important. I think that there are a lot of people, if I'm honest about this, I think that there are a lot of people who would like to be able to say that they had Indigenous friends, but that they are scared. They think they're going to say something wrong. They think they're going to do something wrong. Was there ever a time in your friendship with Aunty Ally or Aunty Beryl where you thought you might have put your foot in it?
No, because I don't know. It's just like we instinctively trusted each other for some reason, like this is something I cannot explain, neither can they. We just, like Auntie Betty Little is the sister of Jimmy Little.
Yeah.
She had said in an interview, I read, about me. She says, she's so easy, easy to talk to, like this just trust straight away that arose. I don't know.
I guess that the thing that you also discovered in your conversations with Aunty Ally and Aunty Beryl is that family is central to Filipino culture,
yes,
as it is to Indigenous culture, and that there has been a struggle that Filipino women in particular have been through in terms of being discriminated against here and perceived a certain way. So you've had battles of your own in terms of your own identity, and so that would be a connection.
That is certainly a connection, though I did mention earlier, that experience of marginalization.
Yeah.
People of colors, we were called, and so domestic violence. I remember in that story sharing, even Aunty Ally also experienced that to some extent, and so they can relate to that. There were people there, like when in the 80s, I think I was involved in violence against women, Auntie, to fight against that and to expose that with Australian husbands and some Filipino women who were branded as all of them are mail order brides, so that was another thing in common, the understanding that. So it's not just race, but it's also gender obstacles and barriers that we need to, actively fight against.
Absolutely, and that must create very strong bonds. Barbara, another thing that I think happens, at this stage of life as we get older, I think I mentioned it before, is that friendship becomes particularly important, doesn't it, when women are widowed. And also, as we get older, our friends start to die. And so the friends who are left behind become even more important as a sort of support group. Do you find that that's important in the Older Women's Network groups that you have been instrumental in starting, that sense of, there are different phases of life, there are transitions in life that are particularly painful and difficult, and a group can kind of scoop you up?
Yes. Yes, I don't quite know how to answer that, but I do know that one of the things that women come to us, especially women that have been widowed, because a lot of our members, that's when they turn to us. They've lost their mate, and often they lived pretty closely to in Elizabeth's case, she was an artist and her husband used to select the places where she'd paint. And he would drive her to that place and he would set up her easel. And while she painted, he would read. And she that was her life, her painting was her life and her husband was her life. And when that prop went, that was when she decided she had to live her own life. Up until then, she never thought about that. She thought painting was going to be enough, and it was. She still painted right up until the end of her life, but she also realised that she needed other things in her life as well as that. But the women that I've met through the wellness associations, through all the wellness programs, that have been widowed and have looked for something to do in their life, I've also recognised that loneliness can bring on lack of mobility, lack of outreach, lack of everything. It's just that. It's just lonely. And a lot of them realise, women in particular, realise that at that stage of their life, they've got to do something that is going to enhance their health. So as well as reaching out to make friends or join a group or do anything like that, they want something that's going to improve their health situation, because they realise that loneliness is, loneliness and lack of well-being is destroying. It's soul destroying and it's health destroying. So they realise that that's the health aspect as well as important.
And we seem to be going through what many people are describing as a loneliness epidemic. I mean, it's not exclusive to our generation. Obviously, our generation is particularly vulnerable and susceptible to it. As we get older, there are more reasons perhaps for loneliness and isolation, but it is apparently happening to people in their 20s and 30s as well. Catherine, one of the things that strikes me is that, like with so many other things in our lives, we seem to be very siloed. We seem to have friends from amongst our age group. I mean, I'm generalizing here to be slightly provocative, but someone said to me, one of the things you've got to think about as you get older, especially since you don't have children, is make friends with people who are much younger than you, like 30 years younger than you, because they'll be the ones who'll be able to look after you when you need it. Do you think that our friendships are by and large a bit siloed and we should make more of an effort with intergenerational friendship?
Oh, I think intergenerational friendship's a wonderful thing, and I wouldn't want to have any one cohort of or any one age as friends. I like the diversity of my friendship, whether it's their age or their ethnicity or their abilities or their sexuality or their genders. I think that's incredibly important. But I think, one of the things that I've learned from the kindness pandemic, it was one of the fastest growing Facebook groups in the world. We were growing by 50,000 members a day when COVID really hit Australia in March last year. And I think and we grew to 550,000 people in 2 weeks. And one of the reasons that people came to us was because of COVID, because people were frightened. So they came to the kindness pandemic because they wanted to see acts of kindness. They wanted to see that we could get through coronavirus together. That's why they came to us. But they stay because people wanted a kinder world before COVID. So many people before COVID hit wanted to live in a better world. And most of what that better world was around human connection. People want to feel that human connectedness, that friendship, and whether it's the friends we take with us for 50 years, or whether it's our neighbours, or whether it's even just the lighter friendships with the barista in our local cafe, because I'm from Melbourne. All those friendships collectively can help us feel that we're not alone. And even if we live alone, we are connected to other human beings. And sometimes that's enough to make people feel that life is worthwhile.
I think you're absolutely right. It's important, isn't it, that one person a day registers your existence and acknowledges your existence. And if that person is the postie or the barista, if it's someone who says, how are you doing today? Or hello, Catherine, or flat white again, someone who recognizes you and what it is you like or do or are, just one person a day. And there are lots of people for whom there is not one person a day who speaks to them. And that kind of corrosive loneliness, which then, of course, breeds depression and all sorts of other mental health issues, is what we all have to remember and make more of an effort about, isn't it?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, there are, in the kindness pandemic, anyone who's part of that group will see that some of the gestures of kindness are just, out of this world. They're just amazing. They'll stop us in our tracks. But I think one of the most powerful of all is hello. Like passing someone in the street, someone who's marginalised, someone who feels that they don't belong, someone who has been marginalised because they're different in ways that we might not even be able to see. For that person, if we walk past and there's a hello or a good morning or a good afternoon said with meaning, just as we pass, and you think about the experiences of that person, if they have that more than once, they can start to feel that they're being acknowledged, that they belong, that they're connected, that they're worthwhile. And I think that we ought to have a hello revolution, you know, because, you know, and I'm being light about it, but I really do think that it is something that could really transform our experience of living in the world en masse.
Mm.
I think, yes, Pattie, I want to come to you in a moment, but before I come to you, I just wanted to ask Helen, you know, you had a working life for 27 years in customs, and I'm just wondering another big transition in life is retirement. And so you might think that you have a circle of friends because they're the people that you work with. And when you leave work, sometimes the friendships don't survive. What turned out to be the case is that the friendship was circumstantial, that, you know, you had this job together, you had to get on with your colleagues, but actually when you retire, you don't necessarily transfer those friendships. Did you find that, or did you find that in fact you had real friends that you'd made in your working life, or that you hadn't and it was easy to move on?
I found it very easy to move on. I wasn't socially terribly friendly with people that I worked with. I was more involved with my friends away from work. And it's really in recent years, though, I've been delighted to discover that I'm on the Central Coast in New South Wales, and that a lot of the old customs officers that I worked with have actually retired here, and we've come together again, and we have lunch now and again, and we catch up, you know, and it's really nice.
Isn't that interesting that they weren't necessarily friends when they were colleagues, but now you've entered a different stage of life and they have become friends? That's
right. That's exactly right. And we've got shared experiences together from customs, but now we talk about other things, you know. So that's really been great. You know, I think it's been a wonderful experience.
That's great, Pattie. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh no, I was thinking how important it is that we say hello to people that, you know, hello. And it goes both ways. It might be where you buy your petrol. It might be to a homeless person. You know, I used to live in the middle of Sydney, and there were many homeless people with whom I made friends of a kind. And I know that my days were enriched by their hellos and chat. That was great. I just am saying now that here in New South Wales or Sydney, we're in a terrible lockdown and we have one more month to go. And I don't quite know how some people will deal with that extra month of loneliness. We can't say hello to them. We don't know where they live. We can't phone them. I don't know. I did spend an afternoon a few weeks ago at the beginning of lockdown, and I had a phone day and sort of phoned a few friends, and I thought, oh, pardon me. And we, you know, I know that was help to them and vice versa. So I don't know, what do we do about all those people that
I think that's a really lovely idea that you've just mentioned. And I did the same thing. I put aside a Sunday morning and I made a list of people to call. And I thought the people who are doing it toughest are single extroverts. They're the people who are really finding this very, very difficult. So let's start with the single extroverts. Let's call those first and check it. And I think it is a question of checking in with people and saying, are you okay? Is there anything you need? And for example, I found some of my friends are saying, well, I find I'm really falling apart. I'm really wobbly and I need structure and I need routine and I need to know that, you know, I have to get up and get dressed and go for a walk, and someone comes to meet me at my door to take me for a walk. Otherwise, I just wouldn't get up at all. I mean, you suddenly are thrown back on yourself and realize how dependent you are on, you know, reasons to get dressed. Reasons to brush your teeth. You know, it's really basic. We're talking about getting down to the sort of primitive self. Like, you know, people have been saying to me, oh, I'm not changing the sheets, I'm not doing the washing, you know, I'm living like, increasingly you sort of get reduced to your kind of essential animal self, and then that can be a bit of a shock. You know, you suddenly realize, I don't have standards. I'm prepared to be really messy because nobody can see. And sometimes a phone call can just be the motivation for you to go, you know what, I'm going to jump in the shower and I'm going to get on with the day.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think, you know, purposeful lives are what many of us live. But for some people, when it's reduced to that, as you described, not all of us are self-contained. Not all of us can deal with ourselves 24/7. You know, not all.
That's right. That's right. I think some people are not good at their own company. Yes, Deborah. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Intergenerational friendship. My Auntie Beryl and Aunty Ally are kind of nearly around 10 years older than me. And we just get on so well. We talk to each other on the phone nearly every day, you know, and I also have friends who are like more my son's ages, you know, and we get on so well. It's not, age is no barrier at all.
I think that there are some cultures which are better than that than others. And I think that it may well be an Anglo culture thing that friends tend to be generationally homogenous. Maybe there are other cultures where, particularly in cultures where generations tend to live more together, we don't. And that's another problem is, you know, we tend to sort of shunt older people off somewhere. Whereas there are cultures where obviously 3 generations might be living together in a home. And so you've got a lot more mixing going on. And there are some fantastic examples coming out of Scandinavia, models of shared housing for older people, but matched with students who get free accommodation in return for providing companionship and basic assistance. And I think that, you know, we should be doing a lot more of that. Barbara, I just wanted to come back to your enthusiasm for groups, because we're seeing that a lot socially with the popularity of things like reading groups, for example, and groups like Land Care, or, for example, the wonderful Knitting Nanas. You have a beautiful story of 2 women who I think were taking part in an exercise class, was it, at the Older Women's Network, and something lovely happened there. Can you tell us that story? And we need you unmuted.
Right, I'm ready.
There we are.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm very rarely unmuted, very rarely muted, I can tell you. Yeah, I'm a woman of many, many words, not always at the right time. Okay, getting back to your subject then, that was a dance class that was international folk dancing, and we were dancing in a circle. And I might say that in the wellness classes at the centre, I often join in many of the classes, or some of the classes, and this was another one that I joined in as well. So we were dancing in a circle, and the lady on my left, the dance teacher said, the next dance comes from Mauritius. And the lady on my left said, I always wanted to go to Mauritius. And the lady on her left said, why don't you? And the first lady said, I've got no one to go with. Myself and my husband used to travel a lot, but he's no longer with me and I don't feel like travelling on my own. And the other lady said, I'd like to go to Mauritius, so I'll go with you. And by that time, the music had started and we danced around and we changed partners and we got back together, and they got back on the subject of going to Mauritius. And before you knew it, the trip was planned, and a few months later, off they went, and back they came with all their photos to show the dance group, and it was just lovely. And those 2 ladies went on lots of travel after that. Yeah, it was lovely to hear about them traveling.
The random spontaneity of that, the idea that there you are in your folk dancing group and you managing to have a conversation and dancing at the same time. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. And then the exoticism of Mauritius as a place to go to. I mean, I've got a bucket list, you know, Mauritius might be on it, but it's fairly far down the list. So Mauritius is, you know, not a place that all of us want to go to. And then the idea that a woman says, well, I'll go with you.
Yeah, yes, it was lovely. It was lovely to witness, and it was lovely to help, you know, not help plan, but within the group, we heard the plans of booking the accommodation and making the bookings, and now it's coming and you're going next week, and then them coming back with their phone. All part of it was, we all shared that within that dance group. They
went on to travel together more than once.
Yes, they did.
It worked, because no guarantee when you go on holiday with someone, you know, you might share a room and discover they snore, or you might discover that, you know, they want to do things one way and you don't want it, you know, it doesn't necessarily always work. No, Pattie and Wendy, have you been on a holiday together?
No.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Haven't
even thought about it.
Would you go on holiday together?
Yeah, if it happened, but I don't think, I guess we've led such different lives. Wendy is single and I have a husband, so that makes things, you know, different. I've not felt the need to go on holiday with Wendy. Oh, no offense, Wendy.
No, of course not.
No, sort of don't need to. It's yeah.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. We're getting an enormous number of comments in the chat, and I just want to mention some of them. I want to come to this subject actually in a minute, but someone is saying, one of the most beautiful things I've experienced during lockdown is letters from friends. Now, I hadn't thought about that. Handwritten letters, making time to write to people is like saying you matter to me, and receiving a letter is wonderful. They can be read again and again. They are warmer than looking at a screen for an email text, and they smell wonderful depending on the paper used. So there's an idea, letter writing. I had not thought of that. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you all is, there's a lot of discussion these days about social media either sort of destroying the fabric of our lives or enhancing it. Some people say that you can use social media to make new friends through shared interests, and social media is a great way to connect with people if you've moved away, for example. And I'd like to know from each of you, let's start with you, Wendy, whether you think that social media is important in your friendship with Pattie or with anybody else, or whether it's completely irrelevant and everything about your friendship is transacted face to face.
It is. I don't use social media at all, because I find that with my friends, and including Pattie, of course, because she's my best friend, but I really enjoy talking to them face to face or by phone, as we currently have to, because I just think social media to me is, it's a bit cold. That's all.
Okay, Pattie, what's your view?
I tend to agree as far as the friendship thing is concerned. I think there are benefits in things like Facebook. I'm not quite sure what they are, but I try not to deal in Facebook. Generally, I find there's a lot of superficial stuff that goes on in Facebook that doesn't have the depth that I would look for. And yet for some people, it is their glue, and I respect that, and it's incredibly important to them. I think the fact that, you know, if you're a member of a family that lives in Queensland and your siblings or other members live in Melbourne, for example, or overseas, you know, distance, Facebook's probably absolutely incredible, and things like Instagram. But I don't feel, I like talking to my friends. I love talking to my friends. Yeah, and writing. I used to be a great letter writer. I'm not so much now, but that is a lost art in a way, and a lost. Remember when we all had pen friends when we were kids? You know, that was just the ants pants. But no, talking's what I like to do with my friends.
Okay, what about you, Deborah? What's social media like for you?
Well, I've got two private groups on Facebook. One is Amateur Photographer, and the other one is Number 24, which is a group that really got on so well on a trip to Croatia. And And the thing that I find is it bridges loneliness, because eventually as you get on, they're talking about their own situation and they're reacting. And me too, what I do is I put in like films that I've been involved with at social issues, and they respond to that. And so I'm able to communicate that as well, because as it went on, you feel like you know them, and they feel the same way.
Now, it's interesting that you've mentioned that, because I said at the beginning that Aunty Ally and Aunty Beryl, both of whom I spoke to this week before today's panel, they went, oh, no, don't want to do Zoom. Do you think that that is a problem, that it's an obstacle to kind of keeping in touch with them regularly in this very easy, slightly casual way?
I call it digital illiteracy. And that is the problem. They feel like they can't handle it. They don't know it. And they need to have someone with them. They don't, like Aunty Ally has got a laptop, but she doesn't, tried very many times to sort of get to learn it. But it's just like there's an obstacle there.
Yeah, I think there is. Well, you can call it digital illiteracy. You can call it the digital divide. And certainly a lot of people that I speak to say, I don't want to have to pay for connectivity on my pension. I'm worried about the cost. And also there's that great fear of scamming and phishing and of all that kind of, anxiety about, are my bank accounts going to be safe online? Well, you don't have to put your bank accounts online if you don't want to. You could just use very, very basic social media. I think it's very reassuring for friends who are living far apart, or for example in lockdown now. It's just such a quick way, isn't it, of being able to sort of check in. Barbara, I know from your point of view this is not your favorite medium, is it? I mean, you've got the iPad, but you're not loving it.
No, I'm not loving it. I love my computer, but unfortunately the computer doesn't have a camera on it. Straight after lockdown, I'm off to buy myself a new screen with a camera on it. Yes. But then, can I just go back a little bit and mention friendship?
Yeah.
and friendliness?
Yeah.
I often think back on something that happened in my life that was just fleeting. That person that I remember doing whatever it was they did, I remember it for the friendliness offered in an instant. It may have been somebody that said to me, oh, you go ahead of me in a queue. Something like that. Other things too that have happened in my life, that I remember a teacher at one time praised me for something. I got very little praise when I was at school. I was generally in a lot of trouble for talking too much. And not very many teachers gave me praise for many things. And I remember a teacher just saying a few words that were very kind to me. I think I was about 10 at the time, but I remember her words, word for word. And at different stages of my life, somebody has said something that's been friendly, but I haven't become friends with them. But I remember that person and that moment. That'll stay with me.
I think what you were talking about there is actually about what is central to the kindness pandemic. And Catherine, I'd love your point of view on this, but it is about kindness as a sort of currency or a language that we all speak. And so when you speak the language of kindness, it seems to me it can just be looking at someone with smiling eyes on the bus, or it's not something where you have to suddenly throw yourself into a deep and meaningful relationship with them, but it's an acknowledgement of another person's humanity, isn't it, Catherine?
Well, yes, absolutely. And it's about making a connection, which maybe is Barbara's point about friendliness. And I think the other thing about kindness is we have great debates in the group. People from time to time say that talking about kindness or an act of kindness you've done is boastful and shouldn't happen, and you must be quiet about such things. We encourage loud kindness. We say to people, kindness is contagious. Tell people about it and they'll copy you, which is a wonderful thing. So, any of those interactions, if you're sharing them in the group, then other people will go, that's a great idea, I'm going to do that. And so we can inspire each other to greater things, I think.
I love the idea of loud kindness. Can I come back to the issue about social media and how the kindness pandemic uses social media? Is it an important tool for you?
Oh, absolutely. And people said to us when we've surveyed the group, they've said to us, an act of kindness brings benefit to the person who receives the act of kindness, to the person who does the act of kindness, and to all the people who read about it. So that's incredibly important. But we've used it, you know, and I think social media has a place. We've got one of our kindness pandemic projects is called the Dinosaur Squad, and it's the most adorable intergenerational project about dinosaur pride you've ever seen. It's just really beautiful. But what we did was that was a 12-year-old and a 69-year-old got together because they were isolated. Now that was all through Zoom or Messenger or text. And we wrote a story about dinosaur pride, a metaphor for their own experiences as gender diverse folk. And we put a squad around the 12-year-old was experiencing a lot of trouble. The story revealed that. We put a squad around him, and that squad grew from 15 to 60, and the squad has continued a year later, now all virtually. So we're scattered across the state and the country, and we connect through a secret Facebook group where we just check in and say, you know, how are you all going? Are you all right? And, you know, it's not the same as meeting friends face to face in a cafe, but we couldn't do that. There are times and places for each, I think.
Wow, I love the idea of the squad. Now, Suze has posted this in the chat. I'll just read it to you. My little street in Sydney is sharing recipes and photos of our dinners. We had a Christmas in July last week, and lots of houses put up their lights. It's been really special, which is just a beautiful idea. And then Elaine has written to us, long-term friends hold part of our history and experiences. These friendships bring out parts of our identity, which is vital as we get older. Recently, I had to decide between a divorce of a long-term friend due to their behavior towards me. I decided to forgive and continue because I would lose that part of my history and identity. So I think, you know, right at the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about tolerance as being an important element. And I guess forgiveness is also up there, that you have to be prepared to kind of give and take and swallow a few things and maybe apologize from time to time when, you know, you have maybe hurt someone's feelings. Is there anything that anybody wants to say about that? Does that resonate?
Well, it does resonate, but I think it's easy to say sorry to a friend.
That's interesting. That's really interesting that you say that, because I think it's not always as easy as that, Barbara. But I'm going to bow to your wisdom. Wendy, what were you going to say?
Oh no, I would agree with that. I think that it is easy to say sorry to a friend if you've hurt them in some way, unintentionally, of course.
Yes.
And can I say, I think the best friendships that I have, or the best relationships that I have, are the relationships where there has been dissonance or difficulties and we've worked through them. And there's often, you know, much clearer communication and connection.
That's interesting. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that, Catherine? Because I'm really interested in that.
Well, I think it's about what we go through with our friends. So, and sometimes intimate partners as well, a lot of times with intimate partners, but having difficulties in a relationship where there are misunderstandings or people are hurt, to be able to work. I mean, you can leave and you can just say, no, it didn't work for me. And in some cases that's completely justified. But where it's worked for me is where I've had the courage to approach that person and say, Caroline, I need to let you know that what you said to me yesterday really hurt. And, you know, can we just chat about it? And you say, well, I didn't mean to hurt you. I understood this. So we have a conversation and we understand each other better. And then I think it was, Deborah said before, it's about trust. So we've had a conversation about the difficulties. We trust each other better. And then it feels more relaxing, safer, trusting. And then the relationships can kind of go to a deeper level. I think that's my experience.
Okay, all right. There's some wisdom to practice there if you're having a bumpy time with a friend, if you're watching this now. And we've also posted in the chat section, which is just absolutely chock-a-block with comments. They're just pouring in. A list of favorite books that some of us have read where friendship is a central theme. So I'm thinking of Anita Heiss's book, Tiddus, and also her other book, Am I Black Enough for You? But also Charlotte Wood's wonderful book about friendship between older women, The Weekend, and a new book by Susan Johnson called From Where I Fell, which is a fantastic book that takes the form of a letter exchange. Well, actually an exchange of emails, Barbara, sorry, but letters on email between two women who become friends by accident. They've never actually met. And that I really recommend it to all of you. We've come to the end of our time together. It has, of course, flown by. There are heaps and heaps of comments that we didn't get to, but they're there in the chat for you to scroll through along with the book list. And I think Christine or Yumi from the Older Women's Network is also going to post the friend line number. So if you would like to contact the friend line, if you feel like a bit of a yarn, you can reach out and someone will be there to talk to you. Wendy, Pattie, Deborah, Barbara, it's been lovely yarning with you this afternoon. I've learned a lot. And Catherine, sorry, Catherine, you're there too, but I can't see your face. Thank you for your wisdom and your honesty. And thank you for celebrating friendship on World Friendship Day. And I hope that we can all get to see each other and our friends again really, really soon and give them a hug. Thank you all for being here today. Enjoy the rest of your day.